Hello, my name is Anne. Welcome back to my channel In Search of Wonder. Today I am going to be doing the Victorian Literature Journey Tag. So this might be surprising, but today I do not have coffee with me. I have hot chocolate. And gonna be honest, not the best hot chocolate in the world because I made it with, instead of regular milk, I made it with almond and macadamia nut milk. And instead of regular sugar, I used allulose, so it's low carb. But it's still pretty good, and it has pumpkin spice, whipped cream on top, which probably totally negates the value of the low carbishness of it, but you know. And my son is over there working on his homework and giving me weird looks. So, Tilly Shelf and Scally Dandling about the book came up with this Victorian Literature Journey Tag based on the Shakespeare Literature Journey Tag that went along with Shakespeare, which I did not do, but looked like a lot of fun. Maybe next September I'll jump in on that one. But since I am doing Victober, I thought this would be an appropriate one to do this month. So here we go. First of all, the first question is, what was your first experience reading Victorian literature and how was it? I don't know about reading necessarily. I'll give my best shot at it. Honestly, all of these questions rely on having a good memory, which I do not have, so I'm just kind of picking a memory, something that I know for each one of them. So I don't know exactly what my first experience is, but I do remember in elementary school memorizing some poetry, and some of the poetry among the poetry that I memorized was The Owl and the Pussycat by Edward Lear, I believe, and different poems from A Child's Garden of Verses, which I do know was Robert Louis Stevenson. And I really enjoyed memorizing all of those poems. For sure, I can still remember like the beginning of The Owl and the Pussycat. The owl and the pussycat went to sea in a beautiful pea green boat. And then there's another line, wrapped up in a 5-pound note. Anyways, I'm sure if I took the time to think about it, I could come up with a lot more lines of it. But I remember that, thought it was just a fun poem. Had no idea what it was really about. Still kind of don't really know, but it's a fun poem to recite. And A Child's Garden of Verses. Can't pull them off the top of my head, but I know one was about a swing. I think there was one about bedtime and one about rain. Anyways, I know I read all of those poems and I memorized some of them when I was little. And when I taught kindergarten back in the day, I also taught them some of the Child's Garden of Verses, and they memorized those. I do remember reading when I was young, like maybe preteen. I remember reading an abridged version of Treasure Island and liking it more than I thought I would, because I kind of felt like it was a boy's story, but I think I was running out of options to read and I wanted something to read in, and I had a copy of that, or it was somewhere on the shelf at my house, so I read that. And I remember enjoying it more than I thought I would. And then as a teenager, I read Jane Eyre. It's probably the first novel that I really remember. And I really enjoyed Jane Eyre, start to finish. I read it very quickly. And for me, it wasn't as much an experience of, reading a classic and having to work through it. It was just a book that I just devoured straight through and really loved it. So those are my remembrances, my early remembrances of encounters with Victorian literature from way back a few decades ago. Question number 2, has the reading of a Victorian novel ever brought you to tears? I'm sure the answer is yes to that. But I can't remember, honestly, very many specific moments. I'm sure that some Dickens has. I'm sure that some Thomas Hardy has. But the one I do know for sure is Jane Eyre, when her friend dies, when Helen Burns dies. Definitely cried there. And there were other places that I cried in that story also, because there were some other very moving moments. It can be a very emotionally heavy story to read. So I definitely cried in a couple of different places in Jane Eyre, but that's the only one that I specifically remember crying at a particular scene in Victorian literature. So question number 3, are there any people who played a significant role in your Victorian literature journey? And for that, I would have to say my sisters, because, and again, every answer to these questions seems to involve Jane Eyre to one extent or another. Because I remember when I was little watching the Timothy Dalton version of Jane Eyre, which was a BBC 1983, 1986, one of those, in the 80s. And I was a young girl when I watched it in the late 80s at some point with my sisters. It was one of their favorite movies, my older sisters, and I remember watching it more than once. And so by the time I actually read the book, I knew the story pretty well because I had seen that production several times. But also I read Jane Eyre because I believe the copy that I read belonged to one of my older sisters, and they had spoken of it as being a very good book and recommended it to me. So I read it, borrowed it from one of them and read it at their recommendation. So definitely my sisters. And then one of my sisters also, she read Wives and Daughters and North and South and Mary Barton by Elizabeth Gaskell. And she was often talking about them as being really good books that she enjoyed. So I read Elizabeth Gaskell because at her recommendation, she had encouraged me to read it. So, or she had just, not specifically, you know, oh, you should read this book, but just saying how much she really enjoyed reading those books and really loved them. So I picked up Elizabeth Gaskell from them. So definitely my sisters, I have a lot of them. Several of them influenced me in reading those authors. The next question, do you have a favorite film or TV adaptation of a Victorian book? Or what about one that you would like to see made? So I was realizing that there are a lot of Victorian TV and movie adaptations that I have not yet seen. So I made myself a whole list of ones I need to see. But of the ones I have seen, I have very much enjoyed. Well, again, like I said, we grew up watching the old Jane Eyre, the 1986 one. But more recently, the last time I read Jane Eyre, I watched several other adaptations of that one. And I really liked the 2006 one. That was very good. So I think 2006 was the year for that one. The BBC TV miniseries. That was very good. I also have really enjoyed North and South. And Bleak House. So I don't know the years of these. Those were miniseries, BBC miniseries that I liked. And then Nicholas Nickleby, the more recent one, I also enjoyed that. And that one, I have not read the book yet, and that made me put the book on my TBR, and it's still on my TBR, and I still haven't read it, so I need to read that one day. I just finished reading Little Dorrit, and I saw that there is a mini series of Little Dorrit that I would like to watch. And I have seen, I don't know when it was made, there is a mini series of The Tenant of Wildfell Hall, which was okay, but I would like to see a newer version of it made. My sister lent me Wives and Daughters after I read that one, and I started watching it, but honestly the sound was so bad on the, like, it was a DVD copy, and the sound was so bad that I was having a hard time like understanding them because I couldn't hear it very clearly. And I don't know if that's like everybody has that experience, or it was just something wrong with my audio equipment. I don't know, but I found it difficult to understand, so I kind of gave up about halfway through. I have heard that the miniseries for Cranford is very good, so I really want to see the miniseries for Cranford also. I know there was one that I was thinking would make a really good movie or miniseries, but I don't think that it's been done yet. I do know that it seems like only a couple of Elizabeth Gaskell's have been made. North and South and Wives and Daughters have been made into miniseries or movies. But I would like to see also Mary Barton has a lot of similarities to North and South, I guess, in the setting and some of the themes. But I would like to see that one as a movie or adaptation also. And I think that Agnes Grey would make a good movie to watch, and I don't know that that has been made into a movie. Or even Villette or Shirley by Charlotte. I don't think either of those have been made into movies that I know of. I'll have to look that up actually. So I would like to see movies of them, but my list of Victorian novel movie adaptations that I need to watch is really long, so it'll be a while before I get through all of those. And then, you know, hopefully by then someone else will have made one of these others into a movie. The next question is, which character in Victorian literature most resembles you or you identify with the most? And I was thinking about this and thinking about this and thinking about this, and I had a couple of problems. First of all, I find it difficult to remember specific. Are you singing? Son? Child? Are you singing?
Humming.
Humming. Okay. Anyways, I have two problems. So first of all, I cannot remember different specific characters that well. I just, especially like Dickens in particular, his novels are very densely packed with characters. So, and even though they're all like very individually drawn, it's not like they blend in together. It's just so many of them, I can't remember one from the other. And also, it's been years since I have read some of these, so it's entirely possible I may have identified with them, or, you know, felt that, you know, they resembled me or whatever, but I don't remember anymore. So the other issue I was thinking of, the characters that I did remember, that I did recall, I felt like they were just very strongly drawn in a particular aspect, so much so that it was too much for me to identify with, because I feel like I'm a very like middling person with a very middling life, not like extreme anything, you know, like middle class, middle everything. I'm the middle child, like everything is in the middle, average, normal, extremely normal. I'm an extremely normal person, nothing unusual or extreme. And I feel like all of the main characters, like they're either in, you know, a situation of like where either their wealth or their poverty is, I mean, not exaggerated, but emphasized or some aspect of their character, something that they are passionate about, or a flaw that they have that is very much emphasized, or something that, like, either they're very good or they're very bad, or they have this really big struggle, or, you know, something like that. And so none of that really resonated with me. So it took me, like, I was thinking about it a lot and I couldn't think of anybody. So I did what anyone from my generation would do, and I took an online quiz. Which Victorian literature character do you most resemble? So I did that, and according to this very scientific quiz, the answer is the same answer I've had for pretty much every question up until this point, and that is Jane Eyre. So there you go. Apparently, according to the questions that I answered, it is my desire for freedom and strong independent spirit that made me resemble Jane Eyre. No, I can't disagree with that. So we'll stick with it. It's a good answer. I'll take it. And question number 6, to which the answer is not actually Jane Eyre in any way, shape, or form. The question is, do you have a
Sorry.
Do you have a favorite moment, scene, or line from Victorian literature? And I don't know about favorite, but I do have a very memorable scene from Bleak House by Dickens. And then I have a quote that I read in Shirley, and I underlined it and I wrote it in my quote book, and it has stuck with me for many years. Since I read it as a teenager, it's stuck with me since then. So I will read those very quickly. Okay, this is the scene that was so memorable to me from Bleak House by Charles Dickens. There's 2 guys, Tony and Mr. Guppy. Mr. Guppy takes the light. They go down, more dead than alive, and holding one another, push open the door of the back shop. The cat has retreated close to it and stands snarling, not at them, but at something on the ground before the fire. There is a very little fire left in the grate, but there is a smoldering, suffocating vapor in the room, and a dark, greasy coating on the walls and ceiling. The chairs and table, and the bottle so rarely absent from the table, all stand as usual. On one chair back hang the old man's hairy cap and coat. The name of the old man is Crook, that they're looking for him. "Look," whispers the lodger, pointing at his friend's attention to these objects with a trembling finger. "I told you so. When I saw him last, he took his cap off, took out the little bundle of old letters, hung his cap on the back of the chair. His coat was there already, for he had pulled that off before he went to put the shutters up. And I left him, turning the letters over in his hand, standing just where that crumpled black thing is on the floor." "Is he hanging somewhere?" They look up. "No." "See," whispers Tony, "at the foot of the same chair, there lies a dirty bit of thin red cord that they tie up pens with. That went round the letters. He undid it slowly, leering and laughing at me before he began to turn them over, and threw it there. I saw it fall." "What's the matter with the cat?" says Mr. Guppy. "Look at her. Mad, I think, and no wonder in this evil place." They advance slowly, looking at all these things. The cat remains where they found her, still snarling at the something on the ground before the fire and between the 2 chairs. "What is it?" "Hold up the light." Here is a small burnt patch of flooring. Here is the tinder from a little bundle of burnt paper, but not so light as usual, seeming to be steeped in something. And here is it the cinder of a small charred and broken log of wood sprinkled with white ashes? Or is it coal? Oh, horror! He is here! And this from which we run away, striking at the light and overturning one another into the street, is all that represents him. Him being Crook. "Help! Help! Help! Come into this house for heaven's sake!" Plenty will come in, but none can help. The Lord Chancellor of that court, true to his title in his last act, has died the death of all Lord Chancellors in all courts and of all authorities in all places under all names soever, where false pretenses are made and where injustice is done. Call the death by any name your highness will, attribute it to whom you will, or say it might have been prevented how you will. It is the same death eternally, inborn, inbred, engendered in the corrupted humors of the vicious body itself, and that only spontaneous combustion, and none other of all the deaths that can be died. So when I finished reading that scene the first time, I was like, wait, what? And then I read it back again. I was like, are they trying to say what I think they're trying to say? Is Dickens trying to say what I think Dickens is trying to say? And then I looked up on trusty old Google, and sure enough, yes, Dickens was trying to say that this man, Crook, had died of spontaneous combustion. Yeah. Like, seriously. Not ironically or fantastically. Genuinely was, seriously, wrote it that way. And I was like, oh, okay, cool. All right then. So that stuck with me. Of probably all the scenes in all the Dickens books, that one, like that mental image that was created kind of stuck with me. And the chapter, the rest of that chapter leading up to that ultimate scene at the end of the chapter, yeah, it's memorable. So anyways, that stuck with me for better or worse. This is a little more pleasant. This is a line from the book Shirley. I actually wrote several quotes from that book in here, but here is one that I remember a lot. When you behold an aspect for whose constant gloom and frown you cannot account, whose unvarying cloud exasperates you by its apparent causelessness, be sure that there is a canker somewhere, and a canker not the less deeply corroding because concealed. And so true. You can see this is how I wrote when I was a teenager, my handwriting. All right, so that was question number 6. Number 7. Does any Victorian literature intimidate you? Yes, some of the just sheer length is intimidating, because it's such a huge time investment. I feel like that time period in the development of the novel has some of the longest novels. Like Middlemarch comes to mind. Vanity Fair, I think, is pretty long. And I've not tackled either of them for that reason. Someday I'll get to them. I mean, I have read other long books like Anna Karenina and Les Miserables, and I liked them. They were worth reading. Dickens has some doozies that I have read and liked in spite of or because of their length. But yeah, some of them just intimidate me by the sheer length. Number 8, what tips would you give to someone early on in their Victorian literature journey? I would say to watch the movie, because like I said, there are a lot of movie versions of some of these books, and it might just make it seem more accessible, and you can at least get the basic idea of the storyline before you go into the book. And the book will always be better, but I think having that visual is very helpful. So starting with the movie is is always good. And then don't give up. And if one book is not to your liking or one author is not to your liking, then try another one. I find that even with within an author's catalog of books, many people love some of them and hate some of them. And like, just for a very basic example, Anne Bronte, I feel like her two books are both very different. Agnes Grey is one kind of a book, and The Tenant of Wildfell Hall is a totally different kind of book. And I like both of them, but they're very different in many ways. And I think that's true of a lot of authors. Like, you know, Dickens has a wide range of different kinds of books. You know, thematically often dealing with a lot of the same things, but different in terms of length and different in the characters and storylines, whatever. So, yeah, I think if you don't like one, it doesn't mean you won't like all of their books. So you might like another one better. What is your top recommended read for other readers of Victorian literature? I very often recommend The Tenant of Wildfell Hall to people by Anne Bronte, because a lot of people have read Jane Eyre or they know of Jane Eyre, but that's the only Bronte book they have read. And I think The Tenant of Wildfell Hall is one that most people would be able to enjoy as a piece of literature. Unlike, like, Wuthering Heights is kind of polarizing, like people love it or hate it, and it's one of those things where those kind of books that you can admire from a literary perspective, but not necessarily enjoy it as a book to read. Whereas The Tenant of Wildfell Hall is kind of the opposite. Maybe doesn't get many accolades as from a literary perspective, but is a compelling story. And the main character is a very sympathetic one that, kind of like Jane Eyre, you know, you're rooting for her and you want to see things turn out well for her in this story. So it's just a compelling read. Also, I always, when people ask, you know, what are some of your favorite authors? What are some of your favorite classic authors? Dickens always, well, Austen always makes it to the list, but we're talking about Victorian literature. So Dickens is another one that always makes my short list of authors that I recommend to other people, because it doesn't honestly, I mean, he can be talking about spontaneous combustion and I will still enjoy reading about it, because I just love his way with words and his ability to describe people and circumstances so pithily and wittily, and sometimes cuttingly, with I don't know, with a humor and a sarcasm that I just really like Dickens. So he always makes my short list of recommended reads. All right, those are all of my answers to the questions. The last one is to tag someone. So I think basically everybody who is doing Victober has been tagged by this point. So if you have not done the Victorian Literature Journey tag, consider yourself tagged. And I look forward to seeing your answers to these questions. And if you don't have a channel, you can write your answers in the comments below. How would you answer some of these questions? And do you have any recommendations for me for either Victorian literature that I did not mention, or movies and adaptations that I particularly should watch? Let me know. Thanks, I'll talk to you later.